Hello, I'm Vito Quaglia, and this is A Matter of Principle, our podcast where we talk to folks about leadership in school, sports, and business. Today's guest is Coach Joe Caffrey. Coach is one of the titles he's had over an illustrious career. Joe worked for the Wilkes-Barre School District for 35 years, coached basketball in three different schools as a head coach, coached a myriad of other sports through his career. And after that, after retirement, didn't want to get straight too far from education, and it has been a school board member at Wilkes-Barre also for over 10 years, I believe. So here's someone who is the epitome of leadership, whether it's himself as a student athlete back in the day or as a coach or in the classroom, walking the halls of the schools, or now leading a district as a school director. So let's welcome Mr. Joe Caffrey to the podcast. Welcome.
Hi, Vito. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here. So as I said, 35 years as a teacher, a very successful coach at Coughlin, at Myers, a stint there, Westside Tech. You had championships, district playoff games, state playoff games. Then you're a board member now for 10 plus years. You've seen great leaders. You've seen great leaders, student athletes who are great leaders. You've seen colleagues of yours that were great leaders. And I would say that you're a person who's a great leader. You've led so many different groups of people over, your career. What do you think? What is Joe Caffrey's definition of what makes a person a good leader?
Well, first of all, thank you for your very kind words, and I appreciate them very much. And, I guess, the definition of a leader, it's kind of, something that is kind of hard for me to put into words. I don't know, leadership is something that I've always been very interested in, studying it, looking up to leaders, watching how people that were in charge did things. And I think that probably, over, the course of my life, watching people that were leaders and then developing, my own technique. So, to me, I think probably, if definition of a leader is, somebody that, is willing to, make decisions, and live with them. I think that, a leader has to be someone that has, some patience. If you're going to work with other people, you have to be willing to listen. You have to, listen to different points of view and let people have their say. I think you have to try to, maintain, emotionally, a balance where, you don't ever get, too up or down, high, low, whatever it would be. So I just think there's a lot of key ingredients, and then just, I've tried to take a look at a lot of people that I've admired and the things that I thought they did the best. And if there was something that I thought that maybe I would want to do better, incorporate that too into, my leadership style. And I think that, whether as a head coach, or, working in a guidance department or working as, on a school board or as the board president, I think it evolves. I think that, if you're paying attention and, you're able to self-evaluate, and, always be the one that works the hardest, because if you want to be a leader, you darn well better be doing that. I think that, evolves. I hope that I'm better at it now than I was, a couple of decades ago, it's probably not for me to say, but it's something that I've tried to get over the years. So long answer there, but that's kind of what's in my head when you ask me that question.
Well, no, I mean, you have that, that lengthy career in so many different leadership positions. So, naturally you would have something hopefully a little bit better than a one or two word answer. So I'm glad you went there. Now, one of the things you did talk about was, watching some other people that came before you or maybe were in leadership positions when you were, coming through. Can you name one or two mentors that maybe had an impact on you going through, and maybe someone that you took some ideas from or stole some things from?
Well, I would have to just kind of sidebar quickly and say that the first mentors in my life were, of course, my parents, who laid a foundation for me and my brothers and sisters I'm the oldest of seven, and, the lessons that they taught us. And, I always like to say it's impossible to bat 1,000, but I can say that my parents always tried to bat 1,000, and they did the best that they could. And they instilled in us, I think some core values that, have stayed with me, and of course my siblings. And having said that, getting away from that, there's a couple individuals. Yeah. I think that someone that performed a very important role in my life was Jimmy Williams. He was the head coach at Myers when I first got involved in coaching, and was a successful coach, won the championship there in 1974, was the first championship in history of the school. And, I watched him a lot, but the thing that I got out of my relationship with Jimmy is that I like to say that he's the older brother that I never had. He really, really was somebody that I could go to and, yeah, well, not talk, basketball is one thing, teaching me how to be a coach, but he really talked to me about life, perspectives in life, just relationship stuff, all of it, getting, probably financial stuff,
Sure.
just everything. He was somebody, even to this day, I could call him and have that relationship with him, where he really, really is someone that I've always looked up to and has been a big brother. And I think there, a couple other people along the way, other coaches. I'm sure some teachers, there's some, back in the day, some teachers that I had that I can think of. As a professional, I had some people that took an interest in me, not just as a teacher, as a guidance counselor, people that helped me. I think professionally at work every day, when I first became a teacher, I had a woman by the name of Carol McNulty that took me under her wings and really, really, really brought me along as a young teacher. I think as, I got older and got involved in guidance counseling, I had a partner in guidance, Eugenia Hoban, who was a very good friend of mine, but really, really, when I started that job, was a very strong mentor to me. I think that as, and then when I went to Myers, I think of, different people down there that were helpful to me. Frank Wemple was a principal there. And Mickey Gorham was coaching and an athletic director when I was down there, and I would have a lot of conversations with him. I think also, I mentioned, we were talking earlier, John Quinn and Tony Koneski were two guys, and Coach Jim Atherton, coaches that were really, really successful, that had, strong, I don't know, pedigree, whatever, just the word I'm thinking of. They really, really were respected everywhere for their knowledge and ability to be successful as coaches. And they spent a lot of time with me, and treated me, like an equal, when clearly they were, their ability to coach and their knowledge, that it was so much that, it's just something I always appreciated. They took the time with me to, and took an interest in me. And, I never forgot that. So they would be, some of the people that I could think of offhand, in terms of having an impact on me, with leadership and all.
Well, and that's quite a list. I don't know all of them personally that, that I met over the years, but I met a few of them. And, I echo everything you're saying. And there's so many more. I mean, one of the things that really helped me early in my career, I became a building principal fairly young, and I was on the PIAA District 2 committee for a little bit. And at the end of the year, they would have their little clam bake, and a lot of the retired guys would come back. And just sitting there as the young guy, I try to keep my mouth shut, my ears open, and the stories that they would tell, and you would just get all this experience and all these things, and their little, humorous anecdotes, but there was lessons there. And
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And when you get a chance to be around people like that, you better, if you want to be a leader, you better listen from, those guys who came before us. Now,
well, I agree. I have just a quick story to share with you.
Sure.
I was preparing a team to play a championship game, and I won't name the team or whatever, but it was going to be a divisional overall game against a team that we had split with during the regular season, and I think probably people would have felt that they would be favored to win the game. And I had a couple ideas in my game plan. I worked, hard on my game plan with my assistant coach and put together my blueprint for that game. And I got in touch with John Quinn. I said, what, could I meet you and Tony Konecki at this place we used to go? I'd like to talk to you about what I'm thinking about doing in this game. Well, they were there before I was. Those the kind of guys they were. So I got there and I sat down and I went through everything with them, and they were asking me questions, troubleshooting it, asking me this, that, and the other. And then when we were done, they just looked at me and they both nodded their heads and said, "Yep, yep." And I went home and I told my wife, and I said, I feel real good about this now. I said, we got a real good chance here, and we won it.
Yep. And the thing about those guys, they would have told you if they thought you weren't going the right direction.
Oh,
right?
There's no doubt. Yep, and they were at the game sitting right across from me.
Yep. But it's something about that fraternity, that collegialness of those guys. You could be, if you coached against them, you'd be a bitter rival. But once there's some kind of common goal, those kind of guys always rallied, behind everybody. And,
well, there's no doubt it is a fraternity,
mm-hmm.
and I think that it's something that I appreciated even more. As the longer I coached, I valued that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
I still am involved with our Wyoming Valley Conference Coaches Association I'm the guy that, puts together our press conference every year and brings the coaches together to select their all scholastics and their Doc Moses senior game all stars. So
mm-hmm.
I think that's important to keep that group together and for us to be a fraternity. So I've never really let go of that yet. I mean, at some point, probably somebody else is going to have to take over that role. But for now, I feel real good about continuing to, doing it.
And so many of those, the things you mentioned, those coaches, they also got involved in you meant about the Moses thing, that game. There's so many charitable groups that you see those coaches and those teachers that have been around the Valley for so long. They're involved in everything. I mean, it's that building of relationships in and out of the classroom, on and off the field and the courts, that I think really that always made me look twice. Like the guys who are successful and the ladies who are successful, it doesn't matter if you're female or male on that. You're building relationships, and they're like, I remember John Quinn, who I did not go to Wilkes-Barre area schools, but I had known him over the years. And the first thing when he saw me, he would ask about my parents. You know what I mean? Like, they're the kind of guys, they remembered things and they would ask about your families. That's what mattered to them. And I think that's one of the things that when I see younger guys coming through and they ask for any advice or just say, what do you think about this? Always, listen, like you let off with, listen to what's going on, know the people you work with, the people that you're coaching with or leading, and know them personally, and invest the time to sit down and not even talk about work or coaching, just, hey, what's going on in your life? And that means so much to people. Now, leading is difficult, even in the best times. So one of the things I like to talk to people on the podcast about is leading in times of change or challenges. And you have a very unique perspective. You were a student at the time when the Catholic schools in the Wyoming Valley were coming together, and you had Bishop Hoban being that one centralized, Wilkes-Barre Catholic high school. And then you were also in a leadership role when Wilkes-Barre area was closing schools and coming together to form one, big Wilkes-Barre area high school. What is needed to lead when those things happen? I mean, you saw one when you were, a young person, and one at a different time in your career. Is there anything that you saw in both areas that this worked and this did not work?
Well, I think that the one thing that I thought was similar, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say what I'm going to say, is that when I was a student and we combined all the local Catholic schools into the Bishop Hoban High School, in the St. Mary's building, which only had 3 grades, and the 9th graders were at what was called, I believe, the Annex up on North Main Street in the St. John's building. So, because the school wasn't ready. So I never really got to go to school in the new building, but I do know that I was excited. I liked my school. I went to St. Mary's from 1st through 11th grade, and I still have friends that I went to school with from that school. But I also had the opportunity when the first graduating class of Bishop Hoban to make really, really good friends with other people that went to those other schools. So that was a big bonus. I mean, probably a couple of guys that were, I was in their wedding. They were in my wedding, that they didn't go to St. Mary's. I met them at Hoban, so that was number one, the opportunity to meet more people. And there were other opportunities. I mean, there were more classes offered to us, I remember, that first year than we were used to. I mean, if you can even imagine, we didn't even have phys ed until, Bishop Holman opened. That would never happen now.
Mm-hmm.
But, it just was a whole different thing to go to a gym class in 12th grade. So I really can say that my experience as in a consolidation was a positive one. But I was not naive enough to think that because I had it, that, the same thing would occur, when I was on the school board and we were, making decisions that would end up coming, a consolidation of building. So I knew that there, it was going to be something that, that kind of change, in Wilkes-Barre area and in the school district where you take 3 high schools and make them into one was never going to be easy. And, it would, for lack of a better description, was probably going to shake the ground a little. And I knew that. So I wanted to make sure that, as we, seemed to be going in that direction, with more we learned, that we would, that I would learn as much as I could so that these decisions would be ones that I could put my head on the pillow at night, is how I like to say it. And it was a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of learning, a lot of asking questions, numerous meetings over years. None of it was ever easy, but I think that, I was always comfortable with the process. It actually took several years for the whole thing to come together when all was said and done.
Sure.
But, I just tried to make sure that every major decision that was made, that I tried to look at all of it, ask the questions of the professionals that I needed to ask, and just be able to walk away from it knowing that, my vote was an informed one and took in, the whole district, not just maybe a particular area or something that I was interested in. I tried to look at, the whole district, all the neighborhoods, all the kids, and that really, that was a very interesting time. That's I'll say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing about, we went through something on a very smaller scale at Wyoming area when I was there. We went from neighborhood schools to centers. That we were going to close one school that the enrollment was really, really low, and then move the other neighborhood schools into centers. And that was the same kind of process, listening to everybody's, perspective and listening to the professionals, the architects that talk about the finances, the pros and cons and everything. And it's one of those things, like you said, at the end of the day, 100% of the people are not going to be on board, but you just have to, before you cast your vote or before you, go out there publicly, you want to make sure that you're as informed as you can be, and you're doing what you think is right. But yeah, that's not, if you want to be a leader, they're the kind of things you're going to probably have to do, is get involved in uncomfortable situations and have difficult, conversations and not, shirk it. It's not fun all the time, but
yeah, uncomfortable would probably not go all fully describe, all of it. But, I thought that, to this day, I believe that the journey was worth it. It was challenging. And, I respect, the opinion and the beliefs of people that were opposed to it. And some of them are some of the finest people in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always believed that. I didn't agree with them, when all was said and done. But I always tried to listen to their points of view and see, versus what I was thinking and learning. And I just, in the end, I said, I'm very comfortable with my process, with our board's process. I think we had good leadership too, even beyond me. Our superintendent and his administrative team, did a remarkable job through all of that, beginning with Dr. Prevesnek and then, of course, Dr. Costello the last several years. But in the end, the board were the ones that had to, make those decisions and votes. And I served with some very, very courageous people. And, I will always, respect what they were willing to take on and go through.
So you had a front row seat to, the combining, kids from different schools, different neighborhoods, updating your facilities, which at this point right now, I mean, second to none. I mean, if anyone's ever taken a ride just to drive on your campus, it's gorgeous. And, there's so many opportunities and resources for your students there. It's tremendous. Now let's back up and take a bigger look at public education as a whole. Now, I believe coming out of COVID, I really thought we were going to have an opportunity to reinvent education, because I thought that's one thing innovation has not really reached. I mean, if you look at everything we do, the kind of cars we drive, the clothes we wear, the way we communicate, everything has evolved so much in the last 100 years. But if you look at pictures of a public school in 1920 and in 2020, it basically looks the same, and I don't know. My question I'm leading to with you is, where do you see education in 10 years? Is it going to be the same? Do you think there's going to be a we better change or die kind of thing with so many different avenues and options for people now, or where do you think it's going to be in 10 years?
Well, that's a great question. It's a hard question to answer, because 10 years ago, I would never have been able to foresee, where exactly we would be today in my district. I think that, and I don't want to get on a soapbox here, you follow this very closely, and that Wilkes-Barre area was one of the several districts that was involved in the fair funding lawsuit.
Sure.
And, the judge ruled in favor of those districts, and, correct me if I'm wrong, made it law. And then, it took a couple of years after the decision was made, and then just last week, it was the first step, hopefully, in a new way to fund our schools. That will make a big difference for us. So if that, but Vito, you probably already know this, they didn't go all the way with it yet. It's step one of what we were hoping would be a 7-year plan. So, a year from now, will we fund step 2 and then, or whatever. So I think that so much of where education is going to be, at least for us, 10 years from now, is always going to be tied into,
the funding, the money,
how we're funded and what we can do.
Yep.
Deliver, instructional delivery and, what I call them boots on the ground, smaller class sizes, just all of the things, lower taxes. I mean, many districts in our area, and ours, of course, 5 years in a row, have not raised taxes because we know that people are stretched very thin, and we've done everything we can to tighten our belts and do the best we can. But I think that our board, our superintendent, and I think every school board would like to lower taxes.
Yep. In
order to do that, we need to be, the right way. So that would be something that I would hope to see. Where do I see it? All of it. Well, I think that it's hard to say what technology is going to continue to have on education. I mean, it's, cyber schools and, with computers and, where's this going? Where is AI going to take us?
Yeah. That's a whole different podcast.
So, it's really, really hard. I think that, that portion of it, the technological part of it, really, that so many things could happen, changes could occur, so many advances could occur. That I don't even know. I mean, that's hard to say. But I think that always you're going to need to have classroom instruction, whether it's 10 years from now or whether it's 30 years from now, where you are in person and you have a good teacher delivering quality instruction, interacting with kids interacting with each other, having opportunities and having opportunities, with school clubs, organizations, teams. I appreciate you, our new high school, as a campus, and that's what we think, and it's better and better. But so I would hope that, 10 years from now, everything we're doing now just has come along, and we've adapted to the changes, with technology and whatever else comes our way in this next decade. I think there's a lot of challenges for educators. I'd like to see more young people get involved in education. There was a time when, there was a lot of people wanted to become educators, and, for whatever, another podcast, there aren't as many. So I think we need to take a look at that, and the teaching force and just all of it. I mean, I could talk about this a long time. So, but that's a lot of speculation, but
Sure.
I think it, hopefully good stuff.
Well, and I think you hit on so many different points. I mean, number one, public schools have been fighting against that, archaic funding method is ridiculous. And then, and the world, that book that came out decades ago now, the world is flat. Everything is a global economy. So the fact, as a nation, the fact that we sit back and, federally let all the states and all the local municipalities deal with the funding on their own, when they know that all these students from all over the country are going to relocate or at least travel at some time in their life. Most people in 2024 aren't going to live and raise a family and die in the same zip code as maybe, our generation and the generations behind. So it's important for everybody. It's a problem. It's everyone's problem. A school district in one part of a state not being fairly funded is not just that location's problem. It's, you know what I mean? So it seems like common sense, but it doesn't, common sense is not so common, right? And then the other thing that you hit on too about the clubs and the sports and whatnot, and this is something that transcends school and business and any kind of community, connected people perform better. If you feel connected to your job, to your family, to your school, whatever it is, and you have that buy-in, you're going to, you're going to put a little bit more effort in everything you do. And again, common sense
100%.
kind of things, but nothing seems as easy. I always say the people in charge of education should listen to the people who actually work in education, and just listen before you enact more laws and more obstacles. Just listen to the people doing the job and see and listen to the kids. What do they need? Now, your career being in counseling for so many years, I have this question for you. I think the old phrase college and career readiness should be thrown away, and I think it should just be career readiness, because I think the concept of college that we knew when we came through is completely different now. Everyone doesn't have to go to a 4-year school to get a piece of paper to earn money. And there's so many different ways to get advanced degrees and certifications and all that. So what's your take on that? Do you see an evolution when it comes to preparing, our students for the next step after high school graduation?
I do. And I think that, my district has been, I'm going to say on the ground floor with that, especially, we have schools within our school now. We have our STEM Academy. We have our Business Academy.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Creative and Performing Arts. So we do have those kinds of things in there. And I think you're right about, not everybody needs 4-year school. It's something that, and our kids have always had an opportunity to go to the Career Tech CTC, Wilkes-Barre area CTC, and there's a lot of plumbers than college graduates. So I definitely that, we need to take a look at how we do it. I think we've been doing that. I think that, the career thing and discussion of that, I think we probably all need to, do more of that. I think that, the days of telling kids that you can only get somewhere with education, probably that meant to be rebooted a little bit. Certainly an education is something that you always, can always be a good thing. But I think now the cost of education, 4-year education, is staggering. And, it's not everybody, can get involved in that debt train. And I just think that, you're right. Your idea that, we need to take a better look at that. I agree with you. There probably, there needs to be more emphasis on career. I always say to kids in my, one of my stock speeches, but I would say it to anybody today. You asked me earlier where I see education 10 from now. I used to ask kids, juniors, in high school, when they were really starting to get serious about picking schools or careers, what do you see yourself doing 5 years from now? What do you see yourself doing 10 years from now? If you don't have a mental picture of that, then what are we talking about here?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're, and if you're not sure, then there are some questions you need to ask. What do you like? What are you good at? Don't tell me that you're a pharmacist, but you don't like chemistry, that kind of stuff. So I think that those are the kinds of things, that the conversations that, I think we're having with kids. We should be having them with kids, because, we're asking kids to look ahead, and that's a pretty hard thing to do. I mean, that, there's a statistic that charts kids that start the first year and come back the second year or change schools or whatever. I mean, those are interesting numbers. But I think that, we, need to probably maybe reinvent some of that.
Well, I think my thinking on what I'm about to say has really changed over the course of my career. I early on, when I was still in the classroom, really believed in, just an overall, education. Don't ask kids to figure out what they want to do so early. Let them just, be a young person and have experiences and so on. And then when you look at sports and you talk about goals and visions, a vision board and what you're working towards and making the right decisions moving towards those goals. So it's okay for us as mentors and coaches and teachers and parents to let, our sons and daughters from 10, 11, 12, 13 years old have all these goals when it comes to sports and individualized training. And when we know an infinitesimal amount of people are actually going to do that for a living, but it's okay for us to do that. And we invest all these things and we, make sure you do these exercises and eat this kind of food because it'll make you, whatever. But at the same time, we don't have that same buy-in when it comes to a career. And that's what you're going to do. And I'm not saying, hey, figure out what you want to be when you're 8 years old, but I think we should,
I agree.
Look at some of the psychology behind it and thinking about and the schools do it, everybody has their, their career inventories and they do those things. But sometimes, like everything else we do, it's just we check that box and we put that binder on the shelf to say that when we get audited that we have we have that plan there. But it just made me laugh because I was never that way. I always thought that. But now seeing, like you said, the debt train, so many of these kids just say, well, I'll just go to school, don't know what they want to do. And then they're $150,000 in debt. And I think that's incumbent on us as parents and community leaders and teachers to help them make more informed decisions, and I'm hoping education gets on board with that. But I don't know. That's a big challenge I see in schools. That was kind of a long rant. Sorry about the rant, but that's,
No, that's okay. I mean, going back to what I said about, that long ago conversation with the student, what do you see yourself doing 5, 10 years from now? Well, a lot of them, they just, they couldn't come up with an answer. And I would try to say, well, what do you like? When, if you feel like you're going to go to school, what is it? What do you like? What are your interests? What are your strengths? Know that. So that would be, but you're talking to somebody who changes major after a semester.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was going to do when I graduated from high school, the day I graduated, I was going to do, and I had high hopes and dreams and this, that, and the other. Got in a program and it wasn't what I thought it would be. And it wasn't for me. And I changed it. And, and I think that, I picked the right one based on asking myself those questions. What do I like? What, blah, blah, blah. What could I see myself doing? Strengths, weaknesses, etc. And you're right. It's very, very hard. There's an old saying, I'm giving myself an old song long ago. John Lennon, of course, most people will remember him as one of the Beatles, and he wrote a song, and one of his songs there was a line, after they've tortured and scared you for 20 odd years, then they expect you to pick a career. Mm-hmm. I always thought that was pretty interesting.
Yep.
It's just kind of, it's pretty much what we have, expected from our kids over the years. But, it's always something to talk about, and hopefully, give our kids good advice and good direction and good education so that when they do make those decisions, it's in their best, they do well.
Well, and as you've seen, I'm sure as a school board member, even when you're still, employed, in education, the switch on information has really changed where the onus is. I mean, basically, back in the day it was teaching, and really now it's learning, because all the kids that come out of school now just have to know how to learn, how to keep learning, because they're probably not going to have a 35-year career, like we are. And all the information that used to be in those teacher edition books you can Google anything that is in any curriculum. And so the old days where the teacher was the keeper of all the secret knowledge and gave it out in portions and then tested people quarterly and, on finals and whatnot, that's over. If the kids want to, they could read everything in the curriculum the night before, in September. And so I think that evolution of how teachers are instructing and how, students are learning that. And again, that's happened so rapidly because of everything, digitally and the internet and so on. So that's another crazy thing. Now, you've been involved as a student, as an athlete, as a coach, as a teacher, as a counselor, board member on tons of teams, whether it's an athletic team or, a work team. Chemistry is so important for success. Do you think, and you've been with groups of people that there was chemistry, right? And you've been with group of people there was none, and there's a big difference. Is chemistry is something that can be nurtured and grown, or is that organic? Does that just come with the people on that team, or is that something that the leader of that team could help grow? What do you think?
Maybe there's a little bit of both in my answer, because I think that I have seen chemistry grow. I have seen it where it was there from day one, but I have, but I have been around other groups where that was not the case, but I felt like it, with, a little poking and direction, it could happen. I think of a team that I coached, when I was at Myers, that they were good, but I felt they could be a lot better. And that chemistry thing was missing. They kind of weren't playing for each other, classmen. They didn't have a connection yet. They together, but they didn't grow together as teammates. And one thing I did, I decided that we would play in a summer league and in Scranton at the old CYC. And back in the days when coaches could drive players to, I would, a group of kids, me and another coach, we would drive to Scranton in my van and my assistant. And I specifically wanted them to have to ride in a car together. I wanted them to do that, to get out right up to 81, to be together, to be out of our backyard, up there and play different schools and just be together and do some bonding. And, that was my intent. And fortunately it did occur. This was a group of guys that, really, really started to grow and care about each other. And, you could see it. It was a wonderful thing to see. And they ended up winning a championship, a league and a district championship. And, that relationship, that's forever. It's what we're together is forever. And I think to this day, you would ask them, and they appreciate, one another and all their hard work and everything that they went through together. So that was just like a little example of how I took a chance. It could have not worked, but in this case, I give the credit to the players, the kids, that they did the heavy lifting that needed to develop that chemistry. Now, other times, maybe you try something with a group that needed a little bit of chemistry and it just didn't come together. It's just the way it is. And then of course there are those times when it's a beautiful thing when it's just there.
Mm-hmm.
When it's just there, it's just a beautiful thing to be around.
And that's really, if you could bottle that, right, you'd be the most successful coach in the world. And sometimes it's just the way the stars align and you have the right personalities together. And that's where it always goes back to it's people, not programs. I mean, you could have the best game plan in the world, but if you don't have the right people putting it into play, it doesn't work, so it's the same thing in any work field. If you could have a master plan, but if you have people that are just giving, half-hearted, mediocre effort, it's never going to work. And I think that's one of those things, that balance of when people go through something difficult and they persevere, then they have that common bond at the end where they can draw on that. Like, hey, we went through a tough time before and we got through. We know what it's like. So sometimes it happens naturally. And then other times, like you did, you had to put something there a little artificial. And, it wasn't to make some kind of adversity or something, a challenge to get people to come out of their comfort zone and then see what happens. And I think that's the mark of a really good leader, a really good coach, really whatever it is. To sense that, to assess, okay, there's something missing here and I better do something to maybe, stir this sauce a little bit more. I think my grandmother's sauce, there was just a way that she made it. She could tell me all the ingredients, but I could never make it taste the way she did. It's just, so that's what I think a good leader does. They know how to stir that sauce just the right way to make sure all the ingredients work the right way. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you earlier, but I didn't. Now, how do you motivate? I mean, everybody's motivated. I'm sure you're motivated a certain way. Maybe you were intrinsically motivated. Maybe you needed to have somebody, light a fire under you. Not sure. How long does it take a coach or a leader, a department chair or a building leader? It doesn't matter. How long do you think it takes them to figure out how to motivate their people? Is that something that the good leaders pick up quickly, or is that something that takes time regardless of who you are?
I think probably is something that takes time. I wouldn't be honest if I said that was something that I got right. I think that every individual, has their own way of being motivated. And I think that's the job of, to see if they could find that. Some people are easily motivated. You don't have to say much. They are self-motivated. Make your job a lot easier. I think that there are, other individuals that just need a little prodding or, a little more prodding. And then there are some people that it's very hard to find the right button to push to get them going. You don't always hit it. You don't always find it. I mean, but I think that, you have to keep trying. So what, in a guidance department, whether it's, on the school board, I think the thing that's been helpful for me in trying to motivate people is try to understand that individual as much as I could. What do I know about them and how can I watch them? How do they relate? What are the things that I see that they respond to? Being back to coaching, some kids you can be very hard on and vocal with, other kids maybe not so much, and once again, I didn't always bat 1,000 in that department. There are probably some kids that, given the chance to do it again, I would try to motivate differently, clearly. And probably anybody that tells you, that they don't have that thought in their head, and, don't feel that well, don't really know if, I would believe them. So I think you have to try to understand each person, whether it's a student, whether it's a player, whether it's another adult, somebody that's on your team, somebody that you have to work with. I think that the key to motivation is knowing try to find out who they are, what work, how could you reach them in a way that they will accept you and what you have to say. So, it's a long answer, but I just feel like that, and going back, that's the individual. Now, the team motivation, maybe some of those dynamics too, where maybe some team, not every team is motivated the same way. You can try to pull some of the stuff out of your bag of tricks, some of the old stuff, but ultimately every team is different. Every individual you work with is different.
And I think you hit on, one of the main things that I try to talk about in this podcast is relationships, and that's what you're knowing those people, building that relationship. You can draw on that when you ask them to do things that are uncomfortable, step out of your comfort zone and persevere through adversity. If they trust you, if there's trust in a group of people, if there's been, a track record of, hey, we've been down this road before with these people, we know what to base it on. And that's the key. You have to invest. I mean, there was when I was a student, I student taught at GAR, and Ray Sunday was there. And he was a guy. The only way I explained it at that time was he's a person, when he asks you how you're doing, he really listens for the answer. We know, like, we've dealt with people our whole careers, they're more politician than anything else, and they shake your hand. How you doing? They just move on to the next guy. Well, there's certain people, they'll shake your hand and ask you how you're doing, and they wait for the answer. And then they remember that answer the next time you see you. They'll ask about, hey, how about that? You know, I heard you, how's that new car you were thinking about buying? Things like that. And I think those little things, those details mean so much when you're dealing with groups of people. And all the people we talked about through this whole show had some of those things, some of those little qualities, you know, which, and it's not in a book. You can't find a book that says do this and this and this and you'll be a great leader. I think it's part who you are and it's part getting better at it, but a lot of it is just innate. It has to be part of who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Do you now, we talked about laws and a little bit, we didn't get into procedures in school districts and things like that, but there's a push now. I see there's a lot of school districts talking about, you know, completely locking down cell phones during the school day. And, you know, social media has been such a hot button. It's a useful tool in so many ways, and it's a distraction in other ways. And it all depends, I think, on the age of the kids. I think 16, 17, 18-year-olds deal with it a lot better than maybe elementary and middle school kids. What do you think has been the biggest pro and con with social media in schools?
Well, we are having a conversation now as to, you know, the direction that we go with cell phones, because it seems like that is something that has really, really heated up across the country, and, you know, of course in Pennsylvania now. So that's number one. I don't think there's a world that can exist where people aren't going to have phones. Kids aren't going to have phones. I think there's a lot of, you know, good reasons that they need to have them. I think that, you know, communication and being able to, you know, emergency situations. I mean, keeping in touch with their parents or guardians, whatever. I mean, there are pros for them to have a phone with them.
Well,
the cons begin when they.
But not to mention the fact that it's basically a computer in your hand. I mean, it's one thing for the communication part.
Computer in your hand.
Yeah. So there's. Yeah. I mean, you can look up.
It is. Yeah. Well. Yeah. You're well said. It is, and that's something, you know, to, you know, my family members. You know, the phone is an important. It's all of that, and it's a computer in your hand. So yeah, but you know, the cons, the negatives are that, you know, they're looking at them all the time, and I think it's beyond a distraction. I think it, you know, I don't think it's helping us educate kids. I don't think it's helping them, you know, when they're looking at or taking a video of somebody or listening to music, trying to put the in. I just think that, you know, that we have to find a way that kids can have their phones in school, but not be using in class. And I know that they're not supposed to use them in class, but kids always find a way.
Oh yeah.
It seems they always find a way. So I think that, you know, we're going to really start to take a deep dive with it. I'm sure that, you know, you are too.
Yeah, we all are.
Yeah. We you know, I think that, you know, I don't know what the answer. I'm not going to tell you that I do. I can see the value of them having them, and I can see how they can absolutely interfere, you know, with the education.
Yeah,
we're trying to accomplish every day.
I mean, it might be just the simplest kind of thing, where you even see it now with people. You know, they go out for dinner and they all put their phone somewhere, and they'll say, "First person that checks their phone has to pay for the dinner." You know, the people are trying to have conversations again in social settings where everyone's not checking their phone. I mean, one thing I know, it's kind of a smart alecky answer if a teacher would say to me, well, you know, what do I do about these kids on the, now part of me wants to say, well, be more, you know, exciting than a cell phone, or be more interesting than a cell phone. But if you think about that part, we've all been at meetings, and if the speaker at the meeting has our attention, we don't check our phone. But as soon as the guy who's leading the meeting starts to drone on, we're looking at our phone for our email or for the next, you know, maybe we missed the text. So we're all guilty of the same thing. I mean, that's the hardest part about this is, as a society, we all do it, you know, and I don't know the right answer either. I know it's an issue. And then not to mention the whole other thing with the younger kids, and, you know, it really ties into their mental health. You know, they get so tied into how many likes they have and how many people are following them and things like that. That's even a bigger issue, you know, not to mention, you know, distracting from the teaching, but also how these kids feel about themselves. So yeah, I don't envy anybody who's trying to figure this stuff out.
social media for all the good, and they're certainly good. We've connected people and all, but I think that, it has had such an impact on our society in every way imaginable, and probably ways we haven't even figured out yet.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be looking at it and studying it years from now as to, how it changed society. Absolutely has. And I just think that, we're having a hard time catching up with it.
Well, and that's where all the things we talked about to kind of come full circle and tie a bow on this. We talked about success, and everything you brought up was always that personal connection. You know what I mean? Where it doesn't even, technology is not really involved in any of that stuff. How you talk to people, you listen to people, your interaction with your family, with the people you work with, the people you lead. It's all that personal touch. So I think sometimes the easiest, the best answers are the simplest answers, and maybe we'll go in that direction. Well, I will say, Coach, I really appreciate you coming on. I thought it was a really good conversation. I'm going to ask that maybe, to come back again, because we hit on some stuff that we could spend an hour talking about. So, I really enjoyed this, and I really thank you. And
I would be glad to do that, but I appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. And like I said, this was Mr.